Hello folks, Anahita Rao. So today I will speak about something other than transits. Most commonly, not always, but most commonly, people come to an astrologer when they're going through the nodal dasha, either Rahu, Ketu, or when they're going through their Saturn dasha or Antardasha. And at other times there's an urgent, intense feeling to understand life, to understand its patterns. And this feeling can manifest when you're going through a Chidra Dasha phase. What is Chidra Dasha? It is at times also referred to as Dasha Sandhi, but that is slightly different, and I will elaborate more on that. Yeah? So, let's discuss further. Now, first I want to talk about Chidra. What is Chidra? The word itself. Chidra means a hole, slit, or to pierce. In other words, to cut off and remove. Chidra Dasha is essentially the last bhukti, which is also known as Antardasha. So it's the final Antardasha of your main planetary dasha phase, right? So for instance, you are in Rahu Mahadasha, this is the Rahu-Mars period. If you're completing Jupiter Mahadasha, then the Chidra Dasha is the Jupiter-Rahu period. In this final sub-period, you will most likely attempt to release everything related to the current Mahadasha that you're in, and get ready for the next planet's Mahadasha that's upcoming, right? In fact, you'll feel it coming before. And usually that happens when you are in this Chidra Dasha phase. For this reason, the most painful shift will likely occur from Mars to Rahu Mahadasha, as both of them are malefics. So the final Antardasha of Rahu is controlled by Mars. Now, irrespective of the planets that are in this final Antardasha, right? You're basically releasing, you're letting go, and this can of course be painful. It can also be a time of forgiveness and closure. You're letting go of relationships. It could be something in your environment you may be letting go of. It could be something in your work life that you're letting go of. And most definitely, you're letting go of a part of how you have come to understand yourself. So you are no longer Rahu, you're no longer Jupiter, you're no longer Saturn. Your energy is changing, your psychic energy goes through a big shift at this time. So this most often can be quite painful because it's sort of like a rebirth of sorts. It's a new you, and you're saying goodbye to the old you. The general rule is that all of the Antardashas, the last phase, are inauspicious and difficult. But I don't think this is necessarily true, because there's so many other factors to consider. Though I think that we can certainly say that some are easier and more smoother to deal with than others, obviously. But you will almost certainly go through some life change, especially if it's a long Mahadasha that's ending, right? Like Jupiter, Saturn, Rahu. Also, the Antardasha planet is considered to be the protector. So, it's important to see the placement of that Antardasha planet from the main Dasha planet to determine whether it's offering protection or not. And of course, to see whether that transition will be smooth or it will be ripe with some challenges, right? The challenging positions are of course the 6, 8, 12 between the dasha planet and the Antardasha planet. Because this can cause fear, it can cause anxiety, it can cause worries, which is the signature of the 6-8-12 position. So today I'm going to address each of the Chidra Dashas. Of course, when analyzing how results manifest in your chart, you always have to keep in mind the lordship of the planet, as well as how the planets are placed from each other, as I just mentioned. So for instance, if they are 4-10 from each other, this can actually impact some security concerns. But if they're functional benefics for you, it will be very much manageable, whatever foundational concerns come up at that time. If they're 6-8 from each other, the results may be unpredictable and difficult to handle, as I mentioned. And of course, one question that always comes up is, how long does the transitional phase last when you are switching from one Mahadasha to the next? So basically, this is called the Dasha Sandhi period, the transitional period. The rule is simple. You take the 10% of the ending Mahadasha and the first 10% of the upcoming Mahadasha. And this is usually the time it takes to let go and to do a reset in your life into a new phase. But this is only a general rule, right? The 10% rule. I mean, it could be 5%, it could be 15%. You have to see how you determine that is you see also what transits you're getting at that time to understand how long the transition will be. Yeah. Now, the first one I'm going to look at is moving from Ketu to Venus Mahadasha. Here you will feel like you're coming out of a daze. Yeah. There could have been many unmet expectations during this 7-year foggy, sometimes quite destructive Ketu Mahadasha, right? There could have been surprise losses and a general feeling of detachment from the senses, from your desires, the material world, your relationships, just everything, just a sense of disconnect and detachment. There is no planet, as we know, that does the cutting off, the detaching, and the letting go better than Ketu does. Yeah. Of course, the Chidra Dasha here is Mercury, the end of which is Ketu-Mercury. Mercury will help to transition into that upcoming Venus Mahadasha. So look at Mercury's lordship, look at Mercury's bhava placement, what house is it sitting in, for clues on the help that you will receive from Mercury to make this transition. Generally, at this phase, you will be drawn to others. You will want to connect with others. There'll be more open communication. Marketplace activities are favored to get out of that Ketu fog, right? So you'll get interested in networking, connecting, making money, all those things. The method of release and forgiveness and how you arrive at some form of closure in this Ketu phase will be dictated also by Mercury's lordship in your chart. Mercury will try to make sense of that Ketu 7-year period of like maybe being out of focus, that very kind of abstract and hard to pin down Ketu phase, hard to make sense of at times. You could have gone through some changes and some events in your life that just were so out of the blue that you can't put them into any form, any structure, any logic. So Mercury here will try to make sense of that. It will try to systemize your life so that you're ready for that Venus Dasha. You will cut your losses now and you'll consolidate the gains, if there are any, from that 7-year Ketu phase. Mercury moves very quickly. So you can feel as though you're waking up with a jolt, right? And ready to start fresh. If Mercury is well placed from Ketu, this will be relatively smooth, but if it's not, then it may be a messy ending. It may be a messy ending, these last 12 months of Ketu-Mercury. In any case, Mercury will start to lighten your mood a little bit and get you ready for that brand new 20-year Venus Mahadasha. The wandering mindset that you experienced in the Ketu phase will start to dissipate, and you will start to give birth to new desires, right? After all, Mercury is a Rajasic planet, just like Venus. So who better to help you make that transition? So let's talk about the second one, which is the Venus Mahadasha. And the Chidra phase is Venus-Ketu. This is not an easy phase, and it's certainly not a good time to start a new relationship, especially getting married. It's rather a time to bring closure to contracts, to agreements, to relationships. And it's a fantastic time for forgiveness, especially in relationships. You can experience feelings of detachment or despair with others at this time. It's the end of an era. It's an end of an era. It's a 20-year phase that's ending, and Ketu here can create imbalances in your life and in your mind. And relationships especially get impacted. If you're in a long-term relationship at this time, don't be surprised if you feel disconnected from your partner during this 14-month phase, or if they feel disconnected from you. The method of detaching, cutting, separating will depend on Ketu's condition and placement from Venus. If Ketu is, for instance, 6th from Venus, this could result in breakup of committed relationships. But again, you have to see what transits you're also experiencing at that time to confirm. Yeah. If Jupiter's aspecting the 7th at the same time you're getting this, then you're going to be protected to some extent, yeah, to a large extent, depending on the dignity of that Jupiter transit. Now, because this is Ketu, it can mean an escapist attitude with the breaks that you're experiencing, right? So you may either lack the motivation, the skill, the resources, the rationale to minimize the damage, to mitigate the damage at this time. Rather, your approach will be just to escape. Like, it's happening, let it happen. If you're not in a long-term relationship, this phase can definitely bring attractions, and it can bring attractions with people that are unavailable. Like a longing and attraction for someone who's unavailable. And because it is Ketu, it can also mean that it is difficult to entirely disconnect. The disconnection may only happen on the physical level, in fact. For instance, there's a physical distance, but you maintain a connection with relationships on the mental level, on the psychic level. Because there is so much focus on others, this time is ideal for being more introverted and cultivating a spiritual practice. In this way, the transition to the Sun Mahadasha will be a lot smoother. So, on that note, let's talk about the Sun. Sun Mahadasha and the final Chidra Dasha period is of Venus, so it's Sun Venus. This is again a time of closure and release of the unmet goals, right? Because Sun Dasha will have you focus on your own goals, your individualistic goals. It's a tricky period, this one, because it's the Sun, right? The Sun whose focus is on one's life path. And then there's Venus, which signifies the focus on others, on relationships, on agreements. So you may be like simultaneously letting go of your unrealized ambitions also, right? At the same time, you may be trying to please your partner your relationships, live up to your agreements. So that's what makes it kind of tricky to navigate. If Sun and Venus are in harmony in your chart, then you can achieve a balance here. Letting go at the same time, keeping the vital relationships in your life. The me versus us dynamic plays out here. And if you're hanging on to that self-focused agenda, then this can be a difficult time to make peace and move on. Relationships that are supportive of your goals, of your dreams, will be sustainable, and they may even grow deeper in that upcoming Moon Mahadasha. There are some tricky bits to this Chidra Dasha, but I certainly don't think it's one of the more difficult phases, right? Because upcoming Dasha is Moon. So the challenge here, of course, may be reforming certain relationship agreements, letting go of past disappointments with relationships, and it's difficult to disconnect and detach here because Venus, right? Venus's agenda is to stay attached, to stay connected, and keep the relationship, even if it's not a healthy one. Right? And because Moon Mahadasha is coming up, you may very well do that. You may very well put the relationship as a priority, irrespective of whether it's good for you or not. But this phase will go by very quickly, and these 12 months shouldn't be too difficult. Right? Next one is Moon Mahadasha. Here we have the Sun phase as the Chidra Dasha phase. It's only 6 months. So, a very quick one. And now it will be time for closure or release from the relationships that were brought during the Moon phase. And again, Moon and Venus, being that they are water planets, that's that jump that, but there is a lot of focus on relationships. This final phase, though, of Moon Sun, because you have Mars coming up, is a good time to let go of emotionally unsupported relationships, or just simply dysfunctional relationships that you just have been hanging on to, but you know that they're not good for you, and you know that maybe your patience, maybe your tolerance is about to run out. So you have to give those relationships a good hard look. Yeah. If you don't let go of them now, then the Mars Mahadasha will be difficult, because Mars tends to cut things off without compassion, without kindness. Yeah. And without thinking twice. Depending on the Moon's placement, this may mean that there's changes in relationship with your mother also. It could also be with your birth family. Need-based relationships, because of this, will remain in your life. But if there's too much of an imbalance, where you're always giving, you're the giver, and others are the takers, then those relationships can take a hit now. Again, because of that Mars coming up. Right? Mars doesn't tolerate that imbalance. Emotionally draining relationships will be released, or they will be removed from your life. Check the angle from the Sun to the Moon at this time. It's very important to see whether it's a smooth or difficult process. If they're in trine from each other, or if they're from Kendra 311, then this is not really a very difficult Chidra Dasha phase, according to me. Yeah. Next one, Mars Mahadasha. This is a time to be pioneering, embrace challenges, compete, conquer new territory in your career, in your life. So the closing phase of the Chidra Dasha is Mars Moon, which is only 7 months. Here you will release the goals that you did not achieve, or the competitions that you did not win. Again, see the lordship of Mars to understand which areas of life are impacted. And this is something that you should do with this analysis anyway, with all the planets. This phase, you will use your gut instincts, because we're talking about Mars and Moon, right? Mars and Moon, both very kind of intuitive, instinctual energies. So in this phase, you'll use your gut instincts to realize what to release and what to keep from this Mars Mahadasha. Now again, it's important to check the angle from Mars to Moon to see how easy the transition is and what houses are impacted in the chart. This final phase can be a little bit difficult because it can make you feel very emotionally drained. And you also feel that Rahu coming. So this can be a tough one. You also may feel like disconnecting with all relationships, particularly family. There's also this faint feeling that life is about to change in unimaginable ways. And if you have a well-placed Rahu, this can feel exciting. But for most of us, it can feel confusing. Watch for impulsive actions at this time. You'll also feel a slowing down during this period before the beginning of the upcoming eventful Rahu Mahadasha. Yeah. But this is again a good time to practice a lot of self-care, because we're talking about Mars Moon. Yeah. Next up is Rahu Mahadasha. Now, during the nodal dashas, Ketu or Rahu, karmic events and circumstances are in full force. Fated, unpredictable events, foreign places, foreign people will feature now. What you encounter through people and places will have a faint familiar feeling, even though they're foreign. All sorts of attractions will come into your life at this time. There will be strong attachments. There may be obsessions. There will be unfulfilled desires resurfacing. Things that you've long forgotten about. And they will grip you throughout this 18-year Rahu Mahadasha. Life will revolve around making things happen. Fulfillment of a desire, disappointments, failure, and even a downfall can manifest in this long 18-year Rahu Mahadasha. One thing that can be difficult to do at this time, but you must try to do it, is during this Rahu Mahadasha to keep that moral compass intact, because the law of karma is continuously operating with very strong force at this time during Rahu. It's a significant period because of its longevity and because of the fast pace of events in your life during this 18-year phase. If you proceed with some planning and try to be fair in your dealings with others, and in the way that you meet your goals, in the way that you obtain your desires, then you'll be able to maintain some peace of mind. Rahu, of course, is a Vata planet, which is airy, right? So, if that Rahu is not well placed, you could be completely, you could be wandering, you could be aimless in this phase, and find it hard to return to that center. So spiritual practice is extremely important at this time. Running after unattainable goals is also a signature of Rahu Mahadasha, sometimes by breaking rules. But if you do break a lot of rules, it will have repercussions. And I've found that with the Rahu Mahadasha, the repercussions don't happen later, they happen quite instantly. The consequences. It's an 18-year phase, so you may think that this is life, and Rahu is like it becomes a part of your personality. It becomes your personality. But remember, this persona will also be dismantled by Mars at the end of that 18-year phase. The Chidra Dasha of Rahu Mars is only 1 year, But we're talking about Rahu and we're talking about Mars. So it's going to be full speed and full force, and a lot can happen in that 1 year. It's the last chance to obtain all that you've been longing for. So it's going to be very fast paced. It's a time when you'll have to release all the unfulfilled desires that Rahu doesn't deliver on. So this can be a pretty painful Chidra Dasha phase. Yeah. Just like that Mars moon. And it can bring some surprises. Again, you have to see where Rahu and Mars are situated from each other to get a better idea. But it is a time to cut your losses. Mars has a killer instinct. So it will make sure that you indeed let go, release, and cut. Things that were earned from deception or by like manipulating other people, they just may disappear. And of course that new persona that was created by Rahu, the new you, that'll be destroyed now. And many of the relationships that came during that 18-year Rahu Dasha that were not nurtured or that didn't turn into committed dharmic type of relationships, you can say, they also might disappear. This is a 12-month phase, this last Chidra Dasha. But as I said, a lot can happen because we're talking about Rahu and Mars. Usual Rahu fashion, things can happen suddenly, quickly, and even shockingly. So, it's a tricky one. Then we come to Jupiter Mahadasha. Jupiter Mahadasha will have granted you expansion, growth, maturity, wisdom during this 16-year long phase. Maybe you've gained a lot of knowledge, or perhaps you've also taught others what you've learned, which is excellent. In Jupiter Mahadasha, the closure Chidra Dasha belongs to Rahu. And it lasts a long time. It lasts for 29 months. Here, the method of release and forgiveness is determined by Rahu's placement in the chart. So just when you think that Rahu is a thing of the past, it will be back with full force at this time. The passion for goals and desires will escalate now, especially at the beginning of the Chidra Dasha phase, and then slowly it will wane at the end. Rahu, in usual Rahu style, will transform these desires. You will experience them very quickly and eliminate the ones that don't serve your higher purpose or aren't lasting. Relationships will remain, but the ones exemplified by Jupiter's houses may lose some attachment. Rahu will take stock at the end of Jupiter. Same Rahu style. It will cut misplaced hopes, aspirations that Jupiter would have brought. And Jupiter at time can bring some false hopes, right? Some false aspirations that simply are not practical. It could also be misplaced expectations of yourself, or too much generosity. Maybe you've been because you were so hopeful and optimistic, maybe you've been too generous to others, and they may have taken advantage of this. But if you've been kind of centered, and you've been taking stock, and especially this is the case if you get Jupiter later in life, the giving and receiving will be more in balance, and then this phase will be easier to deal with. And it's not a case of just at the end of Jupiter Dasha, you're the one who's been too generous and too giving. It could also be the other way around. You've attracted people who have been very generous and giving with you, but you've taken advantage. And not deliberately, and not purposely, because we're talking about Jupiter. But this will get balanced, right, at the end. So if you have taken advantage of someone who has been too generous, then they can suddenly disappear from your life at this time. And of course, one of the reasons that this is the case is because the upcoming Mahadasha is of Saturn. And Saturn can be stern. And Saturn is always keeping score, right? So it's a time to let go of all the Jupiterian aspirations, promises in the chart, and move ahead to that Saturn Mahadasha. Rahu getting you ready for Saturn means keeping score, as I said. Gains from the Jupiter Dasha will be balanced out now with your karma. Rahu and Saturn always keep score. And this balances out the generosity and the times, the naivety of the more generous planets of Jupiter, like Jupiter and Moon, for instance. So don't be surprised if at the end of Jupiter's long Chidra Dasha phase you see your personality change and even you become less tolerant with people, less patient with others. How smooth the transition process is depends on the angle again between Rahu and Jupiter. Then comes Shani Mahadasha. 19 years of Saturn. Limitations, hard work, burning off karma. The last Chidra Dasha is one of Jupiter. And this isn't so unpleasant as the last three Chidra Dashas that I just spoke about. Jupiter here will actually help you release and let go of relationships that were formed only out of duty and responsibility and left you feeling unfulfilled. It's an excellent time to forgive. It's an excellent time to even tap into the wisdom and the knowledge and the grace of Jupiter. Just to figure out like what to let go of. And of course, a well-placed Jupiter will help you do this. There's a sense that your most demanding duties have been fulfilled in life. There's also a sense that the heavy karmic load has been burnt off. It's been released. And this can create optimism because you're moving towards that very light Mercury phase. Right? It's a time when you would feel relief that, oh gosh, oh my God, it's almost over. This heaviness that I've been feeling, I can feel like it's almost over. This last phase is 36 months, so it's quite long. Again, the angle between the planets will tell us how easy it is to let go at this time. And I think this is one of the easier Chidra Dasha phases, right? Because the letting go process will bring a feeling of completion, a feeling of peace. Then, the final one. Number 9, Mercury Mahadasha. Mercury tends to be very fast-paced. You'll feel friendlier, busier. You'll be trying new things during this Mahadasha. It's a time for making money. It's a time for making connections. You can indulge in risky behavior at this time. You'll feel youthful. You'll feel full of life. You'll feel like you can do anything. You'll feel energetic. And then toward the end comes that Chidra Dasha of Saturn, which lasts for 33 months. Saturn will cut through. It will release all the things acquired as a result of irresponsible and childish actions. It may feel like a punishment, since we're talking about Saturn. You'll feel that the immaturity and the idealism and the youthfulness is being eliminated from your life. And you'll be forced to match your mentality with the mentality of the external world, right? That's what Saturn is. It's going to give you that practical nudge. It's a wake-up call, which will come in handy because there's Ketu coming up. So this can be a difficult Chidra Dasha. It can be harsh. It can be challenging in some ways. It may be the case that all that is left after this phase are the basics in life: food, shelter, clothing. And if that's the case, it's quite appropriate because of the upcoming Ketu Mahadasha that will have you simplifying life anyway. It's an excellent phase, again, to very much implement a spiritual practice, a disciplined spiritual practice, and just stick to it. It's also an excellent phase to change your routines and your habits. This will make it easier to navigate that 7-year Ketu Mahadasha coming up. And of course, how easy you can do that, you have to see the angle between Mercury and Saturn. So that's our discussion with the Chidra Dasha phases. Now when it comes to Chidra Dasha phases, you will start to feel the change coming before it comes, the transformation. Many astrologers tend to call this a disastrous phase, but it's not always the case. But change is change, and many times it can be painful. Chidra Dasha phases are important periods because turn of life direction happens, right? So you need to be prepared for that. But that life direction that has turned is appropriate for your evolution, where you are in life, usually. The changes that a new dasha brings often changes the identity, the outlook, and the environment of the person. Depending on the planet and its lordship and the position, the changes are good in some areas and challenging in other areas. As always, with anything in life, right? When that transformation comes. A major transit that happens during Chidra Dasha phases brings a change of the new backdrop immediately. So pay attention to the transits happening at that time, especially of Jupiter, Saturn, and Rahu. Look out for those important transits impacting you at the time of that Dasha Chidra. You'll get a clue of what to expect. Otherwise, changes can take some time to manifest. As I said, it's a rough guide, but it's 10% of the old and 10% of the new Dasha, which is the transition. Now, whether the change is negative or positive, you have to look at the Parashara principles for analysis, as we talked about, right? Like, who is the lord of the Chidra Dasha? What houses does it rules? You have to also remember to look at the aspects, the conjunctions. The retrograde planets will behave in different ways. Combust planets, the results will get modified. And you can study this in other Vargas too, like the D9 and D60. Yeah. You can also cross-check it with Jaimini Dasha, Yogini Dasha, to get the final results. So, that's all for now. Feel free to ask questions or place comments below. Yeah, cheers. All the best.